Good evening, YouTube. It's your girl Tiffany. I am back with another book review for this week's SmutNut Book Reviews. I've had a little bit of difficulty in the last week or so pulling myself together, so I hope this is okay. I had a couple of setbacks that really knocked me on my butt, but as I said, I will continue to make these because they make me happy and I like talking about my books. So let's get right into this week's review. We are going to be covering the third book in the Wicked Lovers series by Shayla Black. I've been talking about her for the last 2 weeks, so if you are not well versed in who she is by now, I'll bring you a little bit up to date. Shayla Black is an erotica author. I am currently pretty obsessed with her. She writes a series of novels that I am currently reading. One of them is the Wicked Lovers series that we're currently covering. So this is this week's book, Delicious, by Shayla Black. Cover. I own the entire series. They are autographed. I am very grateful for that. They were a lovely Christmas present from my wonderful mother. So let's get right into it. In the same vein as Decadent and as Wicked Ties, Delicious kind of picks up right where we left off with the previous book. It involves two characters that have already appeared just briefly. So this book is about Luc Traverson and Alyssa. And briefly, if you don't remember who Luc is Deke's cousin from Decadent. So he was briefly involved with Deke and Kimber in a kind of menage. And Alyssa Devereaux is the strip club owner who has been of assistance to Luc and previously to Jack, but we don't know anything about her except she's a stripper. So in this book we learn a lot more about Alyssa and where she's coming from. Previously in the prior book, Luc enlisted Alyssa's help in kind of knocking some sense into Deke. She didn't volunteer, but he offered to help her out with a project if she would do him a favor. And the favor was basically sleep with me and my cousin, which wasn't that much of a strain for her because she's got a thing for Luc, like really, really bad. So she figures, hey, if I have to endure Deke to get with Luc, then I will do so. But it turns out that that's not what happened. Deke, of course, could not perform because he was in love with Kimber, and Luc and Alyssa end up having a very illicit night, very, very steamy, and it lasts hours upon hours upon hours upon hours, because Luc, of course, in the previous book, and I'll go ahead and I'll give a spoiler from Decadent. At this point, if you haven't read it, then you probably will, or you won't. I'm not really sure. But Luc is unable to have any children, so he goes off on these binges where he is like constant and almost uncontrollably performing, which for most women is not a bad thing, but of course after a while you get sore. But Alyssa hangs tight with him all through the night, and he's ashamed and he feels, like he did something wrong, but Alyssa is perfectly happy. So fast forward, it's time for Luc to repay that favor, and he's not that keen on it. He kind of wants to back out, but Alyssa basically strong arms it into it, basically saying, look, I did a favor for you and you owe me, so it's time to pay up. And the favor's not that bad. What she needs is someone to help legitimize her because she's opening a restaurant, and Luc, as a celebrity chef, is going to come in for the first week and he's going to help her. He doesn't want to because he's concerned about their attraction, and he has very straightforward plans for what he wants to happen in his life and what he thinks should be happening, and how he should be proceeding forward. So with that being said, she says, look, I don't care, you've got to come. You promised, I held up my end of the bargain, so you hold up yours. And he comes, And of course, exactly what he fears is what happens. He begins to have these feelings for her, and of course he's already attracted to her, but he just doesn't think that she is, for lack of a better term, he doesn't think she's a good woman. She's a stripper. How good could she be? But you know what they say, never judge a book by its cover, and Alyssa is basically head over heels in love. Well, I won't say in love, but she really likes him, which is a huge deal for her. And so in the first few chapters of this book, you see this pull and tug between them, where he is clearly attracted to her, but he just doesn't think that much of her. He doesn't think highly of her because she's a stripper, and she is trying to get him to embrace the idea that they could be together because she really likes him. What Luc doesn't know is that Alyssa is a self-made woman, and yes, she's a stripper, but she's so much more. And as he struggles with his attraction to her, he starts to find out different things about her. Specifically, one of them being that she's kind of got a dangerous job. Being a stripper in a small town in the Bible Belt is not always easy. You have housewives and preachers and people who just don't agree with what you do, and they make it known in some of the more ugly ways. And so one night as she's leaving work, he walks her to her car, and there's a knife stuck in her car, and someone has slashed her tires, and they've left a nasty note and said all these horrible things about her, and she just kind of, whatever, this happens all the time. And he's freaked out, and he's upset. He's like, how dare someone say these things to you? And he kind of feels like a hypocrite because I'm thinking these things about her, but here I am getting emotional and getting upset because someone has basically voiced the opinions that I have in my own head. So he tries to, for better or worse, open his mind to her being a better person and understanding who she is on a deeper level than what's on the surface. And he likes what he sees, but he's still reluctant because in his head he needs a woman who, if he can't have children, then he's going to need someone who either has kids already or who he can adopt children with. And in his head, a stripper is not it. So his attraction to her drives him and her crazy because one minute he's very in the moment, and then the next he's pulling away. They have these passionate kisses and these passionate embraces, and then the next thing you know, he's out the door. But he's also got another issue because he thinks that she's a slut, for lack of a better term, and she's got this bodyguard that he's a bouncer slash bodyguard. He's the bouncer at the club, but he also makes it his business to look after her specifically. So he's there to watch out for all the girls at her strip club, but he's also very protective of Alyssa. And in Luc's head, they're sleeping together. And it's several instances where she runs to her bodyguard. His name is Tyler. And Tyler makes it clear that if they're not sleeping together, he would love to be sleeping with her. And he's very familiar with her body. He touches her in places that most men would not touch a woman if they're not intimate with them. But Alyssa's very desensitized to it all. She's had a very rough childhood. And so Luc and Alyssa, they go through the week because he's only agreed to be the chef at her restaurant for a week, the opening week, and he wants to make sure that it's successful. So they go through that week, and they have a lot of back and forth. But at the end of it, they do end up sleeping together. But Luc leaves anyway. He goes back to his life, and she goes back to hers. And he's miserable. And he's been dating a school teacher, literally a school teacher, who before he went to see Alyssa was perfect. But now, every time he looks at her, it's not the same. She doesn't wear skin-tight clothes. There's not an open 100% like in-your-face aura of sexuality, which is what Alyssa carries with her at all times. She's a sexy woman, and she oozes it out of every pore. And he finds himself in a conundrum until he's at a book signing, and it's his birthday. And he's there with his school teacher, and she's basically like, look, what's going on? And he basically says that he met somebody. And he can't continue with her because he doesn't really know how he feels about this other person. He likes a lot of things about her, but there are some things that he hates about her. And him and Alyssa left things kind of, I don't want to say unfinished, but up in the air. And then Alyssa shows up. And she's like, look, I need to speak with you. And he sits down with her. And she drops a bomb on him. And she says, look, I'm pregnant. And in her head, this should be the time where I get a reaction from you. In his head, he's like, well, what are you telling me for? Because clearly I can't have babies. He's had, basically when he was younger, he had a fever that basically ran really, really high. And by the time he got to the doctor, they basically told him that the fever had made him sterile. And he would never be able to have children. So in his head, it's like, well, why are you telling me this? And in her head, she's like, because you're the baby daddy. So he, in his head, thinks, well, she has to have slept with someone else. But then it dawns on him, she doesn't know that I'm sterile. And I don't care if she slept with someone else, because this is a baby that I get to be around and I can help raise and I can have a family. And so he sets out to basically deceive her. And he marries her so that he can be the father of this baby. And in the process of them getting married, she reveals a lot of herself and a lot of her very tragic and damaged past, and some very horrible things happen. It's a very painful story almost. She's a very lucky woman in a lot of terms, but it's a lot of bad things that happen to her and a lot of terrible things that continue to follow her. At the end of the day, and as I said, I don't want to give away the ending of the book, and I never want to give away the ending because I hope that you guys will actually go out, pick up these books, and read for yourself. I'm just giving you a quick overview. At the end of the day, Alyssa's a really strong individual, and I love the character of Alyssa, and I love how she's written, because she never caves. And when you read her story and you hear the things that have happened to her and you see what she's going through and how she's trying to pull herself out of this world that she's immersed in, you kind of feel really proud of her, because here's this woman who, yeah, she could sleep on her laurels and just be a stripper forever, but it takes a lot to want to open up your own restaurant. And she is a very impressive woman. She's formidable, and you get that when you're reading that, and you almost, I would say, and when I was reading it, I almost fell in love with her as much as Luc did, because you find things about her, and yeah, you start to see the layers underneath, and they just keep peeling back and revealing more and more and more of a beautiful person. And Luc finds himself not just wanting to be with her, but really falling in love with her. I think this story is captivating. It's interesting because to me, it's one of my favorite stories out of the series, because it brings about a lot of the real human emotion that people have. Yes, we are judgmental. Yes, we are kind of assholes all the time. And we make assumptions about people. And then you get to know the person underneath. And you find the beauty in them, really. So yeah, she's gorgeous on the outside, but she's even more beautiful on the inside. In terms of him, you see the struggle of a man who wants a life that he doesn't feel he can have. And I think that this book just beautifully blends both of their stories and both of their lives together in a way that really compels you to keep reading to find out what happens next. Of course, you have your wonderful characters that still come along and play a part. So you have Deke and Kimber, they're in the background. I believe Jack, he even makes an appearance, of course. And you find out more and more and more about this group of people as they continue to expand. On the level of the smut level, between 1 to 10, I'm going to go ahead and give Alyssa and Luc an 8.5. This is a really hot book in terms of the sex scenes. Shayla Black knows how to weave a story together in such a way that it really makes you want to try some of the stuff you read in her book, just honestly. It's arousing, it's intelligent, it plays to every sense in every way possible. It's not just they had sex, but you kind of, she writes it in such a way that you can imagine and you can envision each stroke, each touch, each kiss, each caress. It's a wonderful novel in general. Of course you can read it by itself, but I always recommend reading the entire thing. At this point, I would say pick it up. Again, I'm always going to encourage someone out there, if by any chance there is some TV executive or movie executive that is watching these videos, this series would definitely make money. I am a fan, as you can see. Hopefully you guys will become fans. If you haven't picked it up at this point, do it. I would say you can start with any book, but of course, like I said, this is probably one of my favorites from the series. So I'm going to leave you guys today with that. Hopefully you will enjoy this and you'll get curious. So you guys have a good one, and I'm coming.